All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the Beginner to Master Azul series. Um, Not much of a preamble today, just gonna dive right into some games. And was hoping to get that game, but looks like maybe that person is not actually here. So, for some reason, won't let me quit. So let's join this one. So we're at 273 ELO, almost as strong. And let's get going. Okay, so relatively balanced board, only 2 blue, and I'm going to make a play that's consistent with prioritizing the second column, which is to take these 3 black and put them on row 4. One thing that's nice about this play is that 1 blue is a pretty undesirable tile. So our opponent doesn't have much incentive to take the first player tile. So there's a chance that we'll get the first player tile in round 2, depending on what they take. Okay, so they choose to go for 2 white, basically competing for the same column. So I'm not going to defend that or anything. I'm going to continue to work on our bottom rows and just secure the first player tile and this 1 red for row 5. And this might look like a weird play to some of you, like there's all these 2 yellows around and things that maybe look better than one red, but I like to have the first player tile in round 2 if possible, and I'm not really concerned about my upper rows much. So okay, so now we have an interesting choice, which is that we could play these 3 yellow on row 3 and get a row 3 where we otherwise might not. But then if our opponent takes 2 yellow for row 2, we're kind of forced to take the 2 black for row 2. That would be in the center. So I'm actually not going to make that play. And I'm just going to take this 1 black. And we'll see what happens here. The nice thing about these 3 yellow is that our opponent's not really incentivized to take them. Okay, so they take the yellow for the first column, row 5. So my play here is pretty easy. This is just take these 2 yellow on row 2. And let's see how this shakes out. Our opponent can still secure their second row, basically by taking either the white or the yellow. They would create a situation in which there's 2 blue and 2 red in the center. So they would be guaranteed to still be able to get their second row. Yep, nice play. So now we have a decision. My opponent needs 4 red, so, and I obviously need red as well. So I'm going to make the choice to take the reds, and presumably they'll take the blue. And then there's actually some thought here with, like we need whites for row 3. So we could take 1 white for row 1 and reduce our overall need for white. But I think the prospect of better adjacency and decreasing my opponent's ability for adjacency, I will take the black there. But just like I talked about with like how many tiles you need in total for a game, we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 white tiles. So taking that one would have put a dent in that, made it so we only need 5 white tiles, but decided against it. Okay, let's see. Oof, not a lot of reds. Tough, tough draw for us. Okay, so what do we want to do here? Wow, really tough draw for us. So the thing to notice is like blue and red are our row 2 adjacencies. We also want red for row 5. So it's not looking good for our row 2 necessarily. I could just opt to like play white on row 2 or black on row 2. But I also want row 3 white. So I'm going to go ahead and take these blues for row 2. One thing it does is it eliminates the possibility of my opponent getting them for their row 3, which is really strong. There's a world in which, you know, they would get this yellow, row 2 yellow also. And this would be like a really nice points haul for them. So yeah, just taking those 3 blue off the board in a way that is good for us and not great for our opponent. Okay, so opponent takes the yellow that they need. They need black, so let's make them pay for it by putting 4 black in the center. And they play it on row 4, so you know I think, and I mean that's an option, and they're set up to maybe build 2 columns, but they're going to need a lot of red, and there's a lot of red left, so maybe they'll get it. Okay, so let's see what we want to do here. I don't want to group those 2 red together and let my opponent take them. So let's take one. We'll put the pressure on a little bit here. And if my opponent takes this 1 red, we can take the 2 white and we'll end up forcing. Okay, so they don't do that. Oh wow, row 1. I don't completely understand the row 1 choice versus the row 2 choice. I guess there's these 4 whites, so they are confident they can get row 2. Yeah, let's just take these 2 whites. I don't know if they can take the red from us at this point. That being said, we're going to run into a situation where we're going to play the red on row 1, not row 5, which is still good for us. Yeah, so basically if I take the red for row 5, then if they take the blue, I can't get row 1. So we just play it on row 1. Now, question of whether or not to play this blue. It feels easy to throw away, but every point counts. Um, there's 14 blue left, which is quite a lot. Our opponent's going to be focused on red in row 4 and 5, and they're blocked on row 3. So let's play this blue. And presumably we'll have an opportunity to, blue should be the second most common color in this round, so we should have a good opportunity to fill that. Okay. Yeah, so lots of reds for our opponent. So we have a choice here between, basically I'm going to take these two reds, of course. I could play them on row 2 instead of row 5, but I don't have anywhere good for these whites. So I kind of want to keep row 2 for the whites, and you'll notice there's only 5 whites left, so it's actually a good time to get my row 2 and probably even my row 1 white. So we'll do that, or we'll plan for that. Some other things to keep in mind. Our opponent wants 2 blacks for their row 3. Yep. So here's I wish I had screenshotted that, but I think it would have been better for my opponent to actually just group those blacks together instead of just picking one, because now it's pretty easy for me to defend. Like I only have to take 1 negative, whereas if I have to take 2 negatives, and I think the first player token along with it, it's a tougher pill to swallow. But here, this is pretty straightforward. The downside is my opponent can group the whites together that I wanted for my row 2, but my opponent's not going to get their row 2 this round. So, there's some. So we're going to take this. We're going to take a bunch of negatives this round, but we're going to get row 2 where our opponent isn't. In fact, they're only going to complete row 1, I think. So although we're taking a bunch of negatives, we're gaining a positional advantage. Okay, fascinating. So basically they're saying like, hey, I'm going to force you to take this 1 yellow, and you're not going to get to finish your blues, which is fine by me. They can take 4 blue all they want. It does very little for their board. And if they leave it to me, then I would probably actually play them on row 3. Okay, so again, taking this red -2. I don't really want to block my row 3 because there's still a lot of blue left and my opponents can't play any of it. So they're blocked on row 3, they're blocked on row 5. So I'll go -2 with the thought that I will be able to really hammer blue and maybe get row 3 and row 4. Of course, not a lot of blue. Which wasn't unexpected. Blue wasn't like overwhelmingly common there. Okay, so what are we looking at here? We have bad prospects for taking the first player tile, so that's unfortunate. Obviously, we want row 2 red. Blue or white's fine here. I would actually maybe lean towards blue so that we can spend all the round 5 blues on row 3 and row 4. Yeah, not great options here. I think what I'm going to do is group these black together to kind of force my opponent's hand. So I'm going to take 1 red for my row 2. And my opponent will likely kind of have to take that one black. Yeah. Um, and then the next thing I'm going to do is my opponent wants row two yellow, um, whereas I have row five yellow wide open. So I'm going to take the red from this factory to group all these yellows together. And in doing so, I've also created three black for myself, which is nice for my row three. And, I'm remaining flexible on row one with blue or white. So there was the option there to take um, maybe row three yellow, but I get better point scoring from row three black. Okay, so um, yeah, I'm actually gonna confirm this row three black. So my opponent's still in the same situation with the yellows. Like they obviously they can take row four yellow, but um, that's not a threat. It's worth 2 points, and they go -1 for doing it. So you can see like it looked like I passed up on some opportunities. I mean, for one, I did pass up on an opportunity to take the first player token, um, to get like I chose to take a red from a factory instead of from the middle. There was one in the middle, so I could have done it. Um, so I passed up on that opportunity, but you can see the havoc that grouping these yellows has created for my opponent. Like it has made their board much more difficult to work with. Um, I mean, and you can physically see it in the amount of time they're spending contemplating what's right here. Um, so, you know, there were chances for me with yellow, but basically, like I used the fact that my row five is open and that I can support these yellows to create a situation where I'm not in danger of being forced to take this big clump, but my opponent is in a really sticky situation with it. So okay, so in this situation, I'm gonna take the whites just so that I'm happy with either outcome. If I take the blues, like, and then I get the whites, I don't really want them. Um, so I'm going to take the whites for row one. And if I get two blue for my row four, great. If I get six yellow, that's fine too. That's a net zero for us. Earn a point, lose a point. So happy to do that. All right, so we are up by 8 going into what's presumably the last round. Um, our opponent doesn't have any major threats. They can't complete this second column. They don't have any color bonuses available. So we're going to keep this pretty simple and just score the points we need, end the game. And there's almost no way our opponent should be able to outscore us by 8. Of course, we will be careful. So our opponent can get row 3 blue. Um, that's one way they could, score 6 points that maybe if we don't get it, um, that's a way that they could outscore us. But I want to secure this black. I don't want a situation where my opponent takes the 2 black for their row 1, and then I'm scrambling to try to fill my row 2. And we want to be aware when you're up in the last round, like where you could potentially take negatives. Um, and we're lucky there's not really no major threats to our board for negatives. Um, so okay, so we'll take 1 blue here, and that will kind of force our opponent to take this last blue. I mean, I guess they could choose to take the 2 blue, but what's gonna end up happening, I think, is that we'll be able to take the 2 black away from them for the row 1. And okay, so opts for this. So couple options for us here. If we take 1 blue, then they will have the last pick, and they'll pay extra for this row 3 blue. Another option is to threaten the blues, and group all 3 of them together. And I think I like that option better, because if I take 1 blue, I make them pay 1. But if I do something like this, for example, now they have to take all 3, and I will get this row 3 red when they do. So they're going to end up, paying 3 points on their 6-point play. So I'm not doing a lot of math here, and I recognize that I probably should be. But there's, with an 8-point lead, and understanding like they're scoring 5 to my 8, and then they're scoring 5 to my 7. You kind of just know that we're going to come out ahead, and they've got negatives. So maybe I should do a better job of actually doing this math. But I also want to like encourage some rules of thumb, I guess. And if you can see, like when you have an 8-point lead, basically your opponent has to like outscore you by 2 rows almost. Because usually a play will be worth, a row will be worth 5 or 6 points. And when I say a row, I just mean placing a tile. So like my opponent placed the row 3 blue tiles and got 6 points from that tile placement. So I shouldn't say a row, I should say a tile. So generally, like a tile on the board will, if it's in the top 4 columns, might be worth 5 to 6 points. So knowing that, I can kind of just estimate, like, okay, as long as my opponent doesn't get 2 more tiles placed than me, I'm gonna come away with the win. So okay, let's do another one, and we're at 294. So we'll stay with good players for now, but soon we will be strong, and we will up the rating range. I should say that I think my opponent played pretty well that game, but they ran into some issues with, building, almost like trying to go for 2 columns, whether intentionally or not. They could have played 4 black on row 3 instead of on row 4, and I think it would have been better for them. Whoops, not 18, 12. Okay, so this is an interesting draw. There's lots of white. Um, the way that I'm going to handle this is to take 3 white. And if my opponent doesn't take the other 3 white, I'm going to take them for row 4. And this goes a little bit, actually, let's see. So when you have the opportunity to take a ton of white in round 1, it's nice because as we discussed, I think 2 or 3 videos ago, every center column needs a fair amount of white. So you can really do some damage by securing a bunch of white in round 1 when possible. Now, the only thing that's not great is when I do this, my opponent's going to get 3 red for their row 5, which is pretty good. So I am debating taking 2 red for row 5 and the first player token, and then we'll be building the same column, and they will get their whites. So let me think on this. Basically, like, if they had, played these 2 blue on row 4 or something, then I would definitely snatch these whites, because then they need, 5 white. But because they're building the column that requires the least amount of whites, I think I will just take the reds. Okay, and then basically we're just going to try to build the the biggest red advantage we can. Try to have a stranglehold on red. Okay, and we will take another red. And basically, we can take either of these yellow or whites for row 2. Okay, my opponent pivots columns, which I don't love for them because there were 8 whites in this round. Okay, so that's another play I don't love, but I'll get to that in a minute. So there were 8 whites in this round, and I have the first player token. So there's a pretty reasonable chance I'll be able to prevent them from getting this in round 2. And then the play they just made, throwing away the blue, I think they should take the black and just play it. And this goes back all the way to episode 1 about investing in your board as a whole. And if they're going to build this center column, they're going to need black. So why not take it now? Okay, so the Azul gods have spat in my face and given us 5 white. So no real point in trying to defend this. We're going to get ourselves into a bad situation by doing that. So let's see what we want to do here. Let's go for building this row 3 blue, which is something that my opponent wants, and one of the few ways we can kind of hurt them in this round, because they have a pretty good draw. So now again, kind of like the 4th round in the last game, I'm thinking of just putting another yellow in the middle to hurt their row 2 yellow. And I think I will do it. And the way I'm going to do it is by leaving the blues separate. So I still have a chance for my, I still have options for my row 3 blue. Interesting. So they just go for the whites, which is fine. So now we're in a bit of a pickle, actually, because we also want some reds here. So we'll go for row 2 red, and it's kind of hard for my opponent to stop us from getting everything here. presumably they'll take the 3 yellow for their row 3. So actually, I do like this white play from my opponent. It and gets them their row 2 adjacency and enables them to fill row 3. So that's pretty good. So this is a mistake though. We will be able to block this, and it might cost us this row 3 blue, but this row 3 blue is like a bonus for us, right? We're never like relying on on finishing the third row in its entirety. So the question is, do we play this yellow? And I think the answer is no. So presumably my opponent will take these blues from us, and then we will take the blacks for our row 4, and then we can play either white or red for our row 1. So let's not play this yellow because we're going to end up with an adjacent tile. Okay, so I think we got out of that round pretty well, but partially because I think our opponent made some mistakes around these yellows. And we'll see how that plays out for them. Man, the black tiles are just not coming. Yeah, so our opponent defends this black. So if I were them, I would have played that on row 3 and then tried to get the reds in the round for row 4 and just build out this column. By putting them on row 4, I mean, one, they just can't finish it. So there's no pressure for me to take this black because they can't finish this row anyway. And two, now they're really going to struggle to make a column. So what do I want? I can't get row 2 black adjacency, so I'm looking at row 2 blue adjacency. And I want to finish this blue, but there's lots of options. And then maybe I want 1 red for my top row, so pretty flexible here. I don't want my opponent to take these 2 blue for row 3 and leave me without the opportunity to finish my row 2. So I am giving my opponent a great play here with 2 yellow and the first player token, but I want to make sure that I don't get stuck. Okay, and they choose not to take it. So there are some things for me to watch out for in this round. There's a possibility of these reds grouping up, and I would have nowhere to play them. So I do need to be aware of that. So for example, like that kind of dissuades me from taking this 1 blue, because then it's, my opponent can choose to dump those reds on me. So you always want to be aware of like what can get grouped, can it hurt you? And if so, avoid that situation. I do want to avoid these blues getting grouped up though. So I'm going to take the 2 blue. So I'm paying a little bit of a price here. But I'll get first player, which could be valuable next round. I mean, most likely there's going to be so many blacks that I'm not going to be able to defend it. But my opponent's going to need red, both for, I guess, row 5 and row 2. And I should have a decent shot at defending that. So, okay, so we want 1 red for our top row. There's options there. So we'll take this black. And again, by taking from the center, we're limiting our opponent's ability to force tiles on us. Now, if they take these 2 red, we might be in a dicey situation. But okay, so they've taken the yellow, and now we're going to be able to force tiles on them if we want. the question is, do we want? Basically, the way to do it would be taking this yellow and playing it here. The downside is we might get stuck with this kind of awkward 3 white. We'll see if that happens. Okay, so this is a mistake from my opponent. It's not a mistake to play these reds on row 3, but they could have just taken the blue, and then it's very unlikely I would take those 4 reds. So then they could just take the reds after. They don't need to take it now. They can take the blue first and then the reds, because what happens now is I take the blue, and now they're stuck with 3 yellow or 3 whites on their discard. So if they take the blue first and throw that away, if I choose to take the reds, then I'm taking a big discard and they would end up with the whites, but our discards would be even. And if I take the whites, they just get to play the reds anyway. So my opponent incurred some additional negatives there unnecessarily, in my opinion. Okay, so worth noting, there's only 1 white left. That means we want to get row 2 white if possible. So we will angle towards that. And we probably want to try to stop our opponent from getting row 2 reds, but we're going to kick it off with just completing this black row. Our opponent does the same. Okay, so pretty dicey situation. Our opponent's in a great position in that they will be able to get row 3 blue or row 3 black. So I'm not really gonna try to stop that, I don't think. That being said, I have nowhere to play the blue, but I can play the black. So I can kind of force them into the blue, which I do like. So I'm gonna take some points here, and they should, basically instantly take those blues. Yep. And I have a choice on whether to, take a white and start building this. But I think I'm going to take the red and basically, if my opponent wants to really heavily defend white, hopefully we'll have some counterplay. And actually, even though there's only 1 white left, worst comes to worst, we can take the 2 black for the row 2. So that's actually what I'm going to do here. So by taking this red, number 1, I ensure that my opponent has the last pick. And I'm putting the white and the black in. So I'll be able to get either. And now my opponent can't get row 2 red. So most likely they take black, I take white, I'm happy. And you can see this row 3 black coming in for extra points now that we have the row 2 white. Okay, so we are up by 11, and we also have a column where our opponent does not. So best way for them to get that column is no longer valid. It would have been to try to get this row 4 red and row 3 black, but filling this yellow means they can't do that. And again, so we're up by 11, we're up by a column. There's no need to get fancy. We're just going to end the game with the row 2 black, and we can pick up either of these 2 singular blues for row 1. And there's really just nothing to worry about. It's obviously you should always think about this, but again, like up by 11 and a column. So we're effectively up by 18. There's just no way for our opponent to score 18 more points than us. Um, okay, so how do we do this to best use our points? We can take the black um, for row 5, and we've got a lot of flexibility on our row 4. We can play all 4 of these tiles on row 4, and then we can play red or yellow on row 3. So I don't think there's any way for us to get stuck here. Yeah, we just take 1 white, and we can play everything, avoid any negatives. So you'll see, like, our opponent got 1 extra tile placed than we did. So we're going to get 2 tiles placed, they're going to get 3. And this tile is going to be worth 7, but that's nowhere near the 18 point gap that they needed to fill. Yep, and we win by 13. Okay, and we are officially a strong player, I believe. We didn't get a badge for it though. Is strong 400, not 300? I think strong is 300. So let's go for strong players. Oh yeah, here we go, strong. And hopefully we get someone soon. There was that table at the bottom with no undo confirm, which is a setting that I prefer to have on. It's very helpful for visualizing what happens when you pick a certain tile. And after playing with it for so long, it's very hard to think about to switch your brain and not have it. Okay. So our opponent takes 2 yellow. That's a nice play. There's plenty of blue for them to get their row 3 blue. So yeah, pretty strong start. So I could take a blue for my row 3, but if they take 2 and then I take 2, they're going to get 3 black for their row 5, which is really strong. So I want to prevent that. So I'm just going to take the first player tile with black. And there's ideas here of pretty much every column, to be honest. We've got, black and red. We could build column 2. We've got blue and black, and a fair amount of 2 whites. So pretty much every column is in play at this point. So let's see what our opponent decides to do. Okay, so they take 2 blue. Now, let's put some pressure on black. Maybe unsurprisingly, I'm going to decide to build the second column. The other thing this does is, now maybe they're tempted to take one blue, and give me some whites for my row 3 or some reds for my row 5. And I like the idea of taking the whites because that's what they need for row 4. And I have the first player tile. Okay, so they just take a red. So let's think about what we want to do here. There's an interesting kind of line in which we take one red. Maybe they take two blue. We take three blue, and then white or black. But if they take three blue, it kind of ruins us. So um, let's take a black, see if they choose to defend it. And if they do, um, we might be able to take the four blue for row three and actually get a row three where we kind of weren't expecting to. Um, the thing to look out for is whether or not we can get row two in that case. And I think the answer is we can't. Okay, so that's good for them. How do we want to play this? So I want these whites to prevent my opponent from getting started on their row four, but I don't love playing them on row three because then our opponent can group these four blue together. And then we have to take the four blue for our row two. Or, I guess we could take red for row two. And then the four blues are open for our opponent. So I don't like that. So I'm just going to pretty simply take two blue. And it does give my opponent the opportunity to take these whites. If they do, we'll get the black for row four. So they choose to defend it. So if I were them, I mean, this is actually not super clear because I could pivot the column. So maybe I like throwing away the black. I was going to say, you could play that black on row five for your center column, but maybe they're planning on pivoting to one of the others. So here's a question of what do I prioritize more, this two red or the two white? And in this case, I am going to take the white because taking the red for them is a little weird. Whereas if I take the red, they will certainly take the white. But if they want to pivot to the second column, they're competing with me and I have the first player token. So let's see if they do it. Okay, cool. So we're going to see this play out. I generally don't like competing for the same column if I don't have the first player token, just because it's very likely that I will be able to, we know the story with this. I think this is a mistake, especially with the amount of blue that was in this first round. Could be tough for them. Doesn't look like it's going to be, but could have been. But what we will see is that the reds might be tough for them. One, two. Okay, so let's jump on these reds immediately. And for whites, we have row three and row two and row one. So we have places to play these whites. Hopefully we pick up row two yellow, but it's not the end of the world if we don't. We can, use the whites. And, one thing to think about is like, I have a really hard time defending these blues. So most likely we won't be defending the blues. That's just kind of something you have to accept at this point. But our opponent making this play is actually somewhat good for us because we're going to be able to take away this singular white tile. So they're going to have to pay extra for completing this. And by taking either of these, it will put two blue in the middle, and then we'll be able to take something to put a third blue in the middle. And then we'll make them pay for this row four as well. Okay, so let's think about how we want to do this. I'm not worried about this black for the most part. Um, that being said, I might be able to get everything I want um, and take that black. But I think I'm going to start with just keeping up on these reds. So these reds are a real pain for my opponent. Um, and they choose to defend the black. So yeah, I think this is a bit of a mistake. Um, I guess it's okay. They're going to be able to get some of what they want, but I basically get to force them to overpay for both of these columns. So I think they pretty much just take the whites. Yeah, and then I can take the yellow for my row two, and they take the blue for their row two. Um, Alternatively, it actually 2, 4, 6. So I go -7 for taking these blue. They go -7 for taking the yellow. So it's a um, we net the same amount of negatives, but they need blue for row two. They need blue for row four. Um, so let's actually do this. This will be kind of a fun situation we haven't seen before. Um, and so it's 0-0. But the idea there um, was that our opponent is much more dependent on blues than we are on yellows. Um, okay, let me think here. So I don't want to take this black and give my opponent the 3 yellows in the center. Um, so for now, I'm just going to take these reds and actually, yeah, I'm okay with putting those yellows in the center. So I can always take 2 white for my row 2 if needed, and then the yellows uh, on row 3. The thing that I need to watch out for is getting all these blacks grouped together. Um, but honestly, even then, like row 3 black isn't bad for me. Yeah, so now my opponent kind of almost has to do that. And so what do they want? They want row 3 yellow. I don't know that we're going to be able to stop it, but we can start with our row 2 yellow and basically plan on taking one of these other yellows for row 1. So we're not going to get adjacency on row 1. That's okay. Yeah, we're going to end up with, again, just making sure we're dumping negatives on our opponent. So they have to take these blacks. We're going to take this blue and play it. That's good for us. And we have the first player token. And we want blues because we want to prevent our opponent from getting them. So we're going to get outscored slightly here. But we are also going to take a little bit fewer negatives. So yeah, we're only down by 1. So 2 black left is an important note. So we might want to end up with row 2 black this round. Even though row 2 red or row 2 white is better. But let's start by taking these blues and making sure that we can close out that Okay, so our opponent takes the black to work towards this column. We're just going to take the 3 and eat these negatives. Could have played them on row 2. Interesting. I actually, like thinking about it more, I think maybe playing them on row 2 would have been correct. Now we'll play these ones on row 2 since our opponent left them for us. Okay, so what do we want to do here? There's 7 reds left. Our opponent wants 3 of them. We're going to want 2 of them. But I don't want to give my opponent row 3 yellow. So kind of a tough situation, actually. I can forego a row 1 play, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, like 6 points for me. But then also we're going into round 6. This is tough. So I take 1 yellow, takes 2 red. I take the other yellow, and then they get the whites. Okay, let's do this. So we're going to potentially forego, or we are going to forego our round 1 unless our opponent makes a very surprising play, but they'll almost certainly take the reds here. Now, part of the reason that I can make this play is because they can't finish that column anyway, because there's only 2 blacks left. But as I said, now that I have given up my row 1 and I already gave up a row 2, I actually can't end the game this round. So we might be headed for a 6th round, and tile counts are off the board in a 6th round. So everything goes back into the bag and you don't know the distributions anymore. Okay, so 3 red is kind of a curious play. I assume, nope, doesn't work. I was gonna say, I assume my opponent's setting themselves up for full color red in the 6th round, but they can't finish this row, so they'll never get there. So what do we want to do? We want to finish out this yellow. We might have a play at full color yellow in round 6. We want 1 red or 1 blue. So, and grouping whites is good for us because we might end up with row 2 white and our opponent maybe wants row 1 white. We do need to make sure that if our opponent ends the game that we don't lose, but we're up by 5, and with the column we're up by 12. So that's the number to keep in mind. So our opponent goes to blue in the center. Let's grab this 1 red. So now we're able to definitively secure our row 2, and we can do it even while getting row 3. So we'll either get the red or the whites. And we can do this math real quick, but actually I don't even need to do the math on this. So the concern is, like, if our opponent takes the whites, they can end the game. But we are winning if they do that. So they'll score Let's do the math. So they'll score 5 plus 7 for the bonus. Then 6, 7, 8. I'm sorry, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and then 16. But they're going to be minus 4. So 12. So they'll score 12 plus maybe some extra negatives. I'm going to score 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So I'm going to score 21 plus my lead already. Okay, so they're not going to end the game. And so we have an option here. We can take the 3 white and look for a 6-point play, a near guaranteed 6-point play next round. Or we can take the yellow and go for full color yellow. The white is less risky. Though if I take the yellow, my opponent has to throw away the white for 6 points. But they have a nice spot for row 3 yellow, so they're going to be able to defend that really easily. So let's just go for the white. So I think this is our first round 6 game of the series. And we're up by 19. Oh, maybe we would have been able to get that yellow after all. Wow, it really would have worked out for us because our opponent has to take this black. So we would have just had slam dunk yellows there. Okay, so things we're looking out for. We have row 3 red in the bag. My opponent can't play red, so no need to worry about that. And let's just grab the blue, end the game so our opponent can't group them all together. We'll try to get 2 white. May or may not happen. And the main thing we want to look out for, I guess, is not getting a bunch of yellows dumped on us. And we're going to be able to control that right here. So when you have a 4 of a kind factory, it basically acts as a separate color because you can't put it into the middle. So when I take 2 white here, there's basically 5 colors, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So even though there's only 4 colors, the yellows are separated. So it's basically 5 colors. So I'm now ensuring, because it's my opponent's turn and there's an odd number of colors, quote colors, I'm ensuring that I don't get stuck with these 4 yellow. So lose-lose situation for my opponent here. They can take 1 white and throw it away, and then I get the 4 reds. They can't really take the 4 reds, so they probably should just take that 1 white. I'm not going to stop them from yellow, so there's no urgency for them to play yellow. Yeah. And similarly, there's no urgency for me to take the reds necessarily. But it doesn't, the way it works out, it doesn't matter. So I can take the reds and fascinating. They could have taken those blues and I wouldn't be able to play the yellows, but now they reduce their own negatives. So okay, so that was an exciting one. Lots of interesting decisions there. We deliberately gave up our round 2, or our row 2 tile earlier in the game. And we went to a round 6, so lots of excitement. Let me see how long this recording is. Okay, so it's been about an hour. I will probably record more, but let's call it for this episode, and I'll take a breather and maybe record more later today. So thanks everyone for watching. We're up at 338, so we're getting into a more interesting rating range where our opponents have some of the kind of baseline strategies down, but are maybe missing some of the finer points. So I guess in that last game, maybe I didn't do a great job of highlighting my opponent's mistakes as much as I could have. But anyway, I will see you in the next episode.